Okay, so we just heard Nicola talk about the new architecture and how good it is, and now it's here. So the very next question that should pop on your mind is actually, okay, what now? Like, okay, it's here. What do I actually need to do? So I'm Lorenzo Sciandra. I'm a senior software engineer at Microsoft. I'm also like one of the React Native core maintainers. I'm a releaser, so maybe you've seen me around. My username is Calset basically everywhere. And yeah, basically today I have two goals, and I hardly ever use Keynote for, well, you can imagine the reason why. But today I really wanted to pump you up with some crazy animation. So to really drive home the point of which goals I have for you today, like I used completely pointless and completely tacky animation, but it works really well, I think. So the first one is understand the core concepts of the new architecture. So we're going to dive a bit technical. And the second one is awareness of the challenges. So we know that we want to do it. We know that we have the window of opportunity now. Okay, what are the rock side of us? So before we do that, let's actually take a step back. Let's look at a second at what React Native looks like right now in most of our apps. So Facebook, you can not look at this. This is the old one. But for the rest of us, the main thing that I want you to see is what Nicola was also calling out earlier, is the bridge. The bridge is a bottleneck, basically. The main reason why we have it is because in the early days, it was decided that communicating through JSON bundles was a way that we could reach the native side. The problem with that is that not only like having one communication channel means that we will like very quickly put too many messages in there, but also that JavaScript and the native side don't really know anything about the other side. They can't just receive this bundle of JSON. They need to unJSONify it, and then they will see some commands that they don't know where they're coming from. They don't know what they're about. So this also means that, for example, a startup, you need to load all the potential modules that you may need in your app because you don't really know when you're going to need it. So because of these limitations, the Meta team basically went back into the laboratory and come up with the new architecture. So I'm going to try to keep it technical. I may rush a bit just because I know we have a lot to talk about today. But basically, the core change, and this is like the key piece. If you need to understand one thing about the new architecture, it's this one, the JSI. The JSI is simply JavaScript interface. But the very powerful thing that it enables is direct communication between the C++, the native side, and the JavaScript side. This is because it's a simple interface. It allows for direct hosting. So you have literally JavaScript code invoking C++ code and vice versa. And this idea is really, really powerful. And it's literally what everything else is built on top of. So for example, the Turbomodules, we just mentioned how we don't know anything about the native side ahead of time. So we need to build everything at startup. Now that we actually invoke the native code when we need it, and we call it directly, we also know when we need to know those native modules. So all of a sudden, our startup times can go down because if we only use like the Bluetooth module 5 screens in, we will only need to load it like at the 4th screen. Not just that, but also, we can call native methods synchronously. Like we enable a whole new set of communication styles. We don't need to rely on a JSON message that will go into a bundle that who knows when it will land on the other side. Similarly, for the UI side, we have what is called Fabric. It's the new renderer. And it's pretty much like a custom special magic turbo module. And what it does is allows for high priority UI work. So the classic example of React Native not working well is scrolling through a list, right? You scroll through a list, at some point it flashes white. That's because you're sending so many messages through the JSON bridge that the native side is not keeping up. And by using Fabric, that problem will not happen anymore. And not just that, like concurrent React, the main reason why it can work is thanks to this ability of the JSI. So direct communication allows for all these like management of communication between the two worlds. And at that point, like JSI is so perfect, so we will not need a bridge, but for historical reasons, for backward compatibility, we'll leave it around for a while. So basically, removing the bridge as its own name, and it will happen only further down the line. It's been called in many ways, like it's been called initialization, it's been called VLS, it's been called bridgeless. It's probably going to change name a few more times before it actually happens, but basically it's just that. Poof, it will disappear, and at that point, we're going to have the full new architecture. Now, on top of all of this, what Nicola was mentioning earlier is the Codegen. The Codegen is basically this optional thing that you wrap all your stuff on top, and it basically allows for these interfaces to be better managed because, the least amount of human needs to work on this code, and the more you can just generate it, the better it is for everyone, especially if you need to generate, C++ or Java code. And this is basically relying on your code base using Flow or TypeScript, which is pretty cool because it's forcing you to, type safety is better for everyone. I really hope that, you're already all on typed system, right? Oh, well, probably you are. Anyway, this is the new architecture. Let's just take it in. Nicola already mentioned basically how it's much better in every single way compared to the old one. And yeah, I agree, right? But I'm also I'm an engineer, so I literally don't trust anyone, never. I literally did a behavior score test, because we're a big corp and stuff. Literally, I had 0 out of trust in others or something like that. So it's a joke, but not really. So because of that, I literally went through all the documentation, all the things that Meta is being pumping out to help everyone understand how to do the new architecture stuff. And the next set of slides are basically like my findings and what I've learned so far. So the first thing is, this screenshot is slightly more updated than Nicola. My fault because I did this change, so I knew it was there. But yeah, basically, if you go into the guides, there's a section dedicated to the migration. And what I want to show you right now, first off, we should kind of give a round of applause to Nicola and the rest of the team because this is not something that all teams do. Like, writing documentation is hard, and they did a really great job. And the second thing is a small premise. Like, what I'm going to show you for the next few slides is just in the hypothetical worst case scenario, meaning you're on 67, so the last version before anything new architecture has been released, and you want to update to the very, very latest, so 71, the version that Nicola has been mentioning that will be out, fingers crossed, in a couple of months maximum. So now that we have set up this, let's go through what it takes for a library to migrate. So as you can see here, I kind of slightly simplified it, but not too much. You basically need to do a bunch of refactoring. You need to change the Codegen configuration in the package.json, and then it's just using the Codegen and what it gives you to wire back that generated code into your code. So what Nicola was showing you earlier, basically. For apps, it's a bit more interesting, or should I say used to be. Like, this is what you had kind of like as a flow of actions when you were targeting 70. From 71, because of this extra work that the Meta team has been doing of the simplifications and all this stuff, it's actually much simpler. We lose a bit of granularity, but at the same time, it's much more, it's smaller. It looks like less work. So hopefully it will be like that. Now, what could go wrong? Everything seems pretty clear. We have the documentation. A lot. Well, not really a lot, but let me try to keep it light, keep it funny. And so let's call the main challengers, the main obstacles, like challengers. Let's just use this term. Why? Maybe I'm foreshadowing something that I want to do later. No, probably not. Anyway, the first one is typing. So as I was mentioning earlier, you need to be using basically TypeScript or Flow in your code base to, properly benefit from everything. For the Turbomodules, for Codegen. The problem with that starts appearing once you look a bit deeper, because on the surface level, it's like, okay, I can use my primitive types, fair enough, function, object array, very good. And then you notice that union types don't work, custom types don't work, asterisk, technically, we're working on that, right? We're kind of sort of doing a custom state type of thing right now, it's in the works. And also the types, most of them or all of them are read-only right now. And not only that, because now you're using your JavaScript side to generate the native side, basically this also implies that you generate for both platforms. So the signatures on the native side needs to be the same. So if you have let's say a custom module that has a slightly different signature between Android and iOS, it technically doesn't work, but it's not true. Like 4 days ago, Nicola wrote an explanation on how you can kind of trick the system into allowing you to have different signatures. But yeah, it gets a bit dodgy if you have a lot of native code. And also TypeScript support is still in beta. Like again, like the main issue here is that because Meta internally uses Flow, TypeScript is kind of like something that they add on top, but because it's not what they use in production, is not as battle tested. So for example, that's where like we as Microsoft come in. Like we have one engineer in particular has been working every day on making sure that TypeScript and the Codegen functionalities are all like, you know, very, very solid for TypeScript too, but there's still a lot of work, and also the Meta team is also doing a lot of work. Like we're importing the TypeScript types into React Native from 71 on. So we're really trying to make sure that for everyone, typing is a good experience. Now, the second challenger, I kind of called it new architecture configuration because I couldn't think of a better name. So you remember when earlier I was saying, oh yeah, it's super easy. You just need to do a bit of refactoring. It's not going to be a problem. Well, okay, actually, I kind of lied. So let's say you want to migrate your library to use Fabric. Basically, if you use any of those things, it means a refactoring in different ways, in different level of complexity. But like, even if you don't use any of like find, node, handle, measure, set native props, like the required native component is actually something that all the libraries that with native code will need to do because they move that call into a separate file. So yeah, basically, library maintainers, you have some work ahead of you. Sorry. We're trying to help you there too. And the second half of this like second challenger is something that Nicole also touched. It's that a lot is still happening, a lot is still moving. So certain things are still not quite as polished. So for example, you would expect the Codegen command to be exactly the same across iOS and Android, and it's very much not. One is node-based, the other one is in Gradle. But you know, talking about these problems and talking of these problems with the Meta folks, so literally use them tonight, is what enables these kind of fixes to be happening, because sometimes they don't think about problems in the same way we do as external folks from the Facebook monorepo. So, third challenger. This is something that Nicola mentioned that I was going to mention, so I'm going to mention it. So libraries, of course, all of us, we live in this JavaScript world. Everything we do is in a library somewhere, maintained by someone that we don't know. There's this website. I hope that at least most of you know it. React Native Directory is kind of like this custom website that shows like you all the React Native libraries that you may want to use. Currently it has over 1,000 libraries in it. If you go into the React Native New Architecture Working Group, what Nicola was mentioning earlier, there's a dedicated pinned discussion about the third-party libraries. So kind of like what the slide Nicola was showing earlier is about. And I don't know if you counted, but basically there's, it's not really like necessarily one-to-one, because if your Java library is JavaScript only, you don't technically need to do much work to migrate to the new architecture. But yeah, so only 6 plus 1 have fully migrated to the new architecture at this point in time. 6 more are in the work, so you know progress is being made, but it's still like, yeah, we're not even in the same ballpark with these two numbers. Now, oh, what's going on? Oh no, that's why I used the challenger word earlier. Okay, so I also wanted to spend a word on React 18 in a slightly different direction from Nicola. Basically, most of us have been using React for a while. Probably we're used to React, you know, being this beautiful flow that just kind of like one directional, everything was kind of like straightforward. And then automatic batching happened. And that basically means that no one knows what's happening with the internal state of React Native anymore. And, you know, it's it's a problem because this means that when you want to use React 18, you need to make sure that at least your state management is fully compliant, because if not, you could literally have parts of your app on different states. And this means that it's another bit of migration that you will need to put on top of migrating to Fabric, to the new architecture. There's a bunch of libraries that seems to be working quite well. Apparently, these two, Zustand and Jotai, are from the same maintainer, and apparently is one of the few people that really understands how React 18 works. And this blog post here is actually, I think, a pretty well in-depth explanation of like what's going on with state management right now in React. And also, hey, I think I've seen that happening. Yeah, basically what Nicola was mentioning earlier, the way React and React Native actually work together and which version are you on is kind of like slightly more complicated. Like, it's not just the version you have in your package.json, so be aware of that. Now, of course, I try to keep it light, I try to keep it, funny, but in reality, like, there's so much more stuff that I wanted to talk about. I'm just like, kind of like, that list of arrows is actually not truly all arrows. Like, some things are really cool and really nice, some less so. But basically, the New York is great. It's great, absolutely. And also, yeah, I didn't put any benchmarks for the simple fact that we don't have any right now, official good ones that I consider reputable. Probably ask me in 3 months. Like, this is going to be my white whale for the next 3 months. So, yeah, it would be nice to have some. I've already poked at some people at Meta. They showed me some really nice, examples, but yeah, we're still waiting for them to come out of, NDAs and stuff. Anyway, so we talked about the new architecture. We talked about how it works, the challenges, the problems. So how do we practically plan for it? Like, I work for Microsoft. I don't know if you heard it. It's kind of like a mess. No, it's a big company. But because it's a big company, basically we need to plan ahead. And planning ahead means that someone needs to sit down in a room and come up with an idea of how we can do these kind of things. Because it's not something that we can do directly, we can do easily. Code bases are massive. So the best thing I could come up with, it's kind of this. I know it's a bit small, so let me try to make it bigger. The core idea, and this is kind of like the 71 plus version of this, is that we need to migrate all the libraries. Like, it's quite simple. Like, all the libraries need to migrate first. Your app can only really migrate to the new architecture once your libraries all work, because there's also a problem of like retrocompatibility. Fabric doesn't allow that, so a library needs to support Fabric, or it will just show up like a red square saying doesn't support Fabric. So yeah, a couple of indications on this. We're working in the React Native directory to basically add a tag or a badge or something that shows when a library supports the new architecture. So that should help, like, for you when you're evaluating. If you need to, like, if you have a custom native code, it's probably better if you put it outside in its own library. You use something like the React Native Turbo Starter to generate the library template. You put your code in, and then you create an example app with React Native Test App. React Native Test App is a library that we created at Microsoft. It's basically kind of like Expo, but not Expo. It's like a sandbox app where everything is handled. You just need to put in your code. Like, currently it's used as an example app in many libraries, like even WebView. So there's a lot going on there. Is it just me or the microphone went down? Okay. It's like, huh. Yeah. Oh, well, I can also speak louder if... okay, perfect. All right, sorry about that. So, yeah, basically, React Native Test App, it's pretty good, especially if you need to have an example app for your library. Also, we already support the new architecture. So literally, in the React Native Test App configuration, you flip a switch, and you can test your library with the new architecture. You don't need to worry about any of the things I mentioned earlier. You flip a switch, and you will see if your code works with the new architecture. And yeah, pretty much also use the repositories that Nicola was showing me earlier. So the one for the app, the one for the library, because yeah, it's going to be a challenge. So why start now? Nicola kind of already said this, the feedback loop. I hope that coming from someone that has been experiencing this feedback loop is like a good thing to say. Like, literally, this working group is very important. They really care about it. as someone that's been working in the React Native space, been a maintainer for over 4 years, I can tell you, use it now. The team right now is very responsive. It's very happy to collaborate with the React Native community. It's something that basically started this year, maybe half of last year. And it's so important. And that's why between 70 and 71, there are so many changes. Between 69 and 70, there are so many changes. So it's very, very important. So concluding here, because I hope I didn't go too much over time. So the new architecture is pretty awesome. On paper is awesome. And I'm sure that as soon as we are going to be able to share more benchmarks and stuff, you're also going to feel that way too. The second thing is it will take a number of months for everyone. I'm pretty sure that for the next 6 months at least, it will take you a number of months to migrate. So it's going to be a challenge for everyone. And also supporting the libraries is basically key. You cannot get there if your libraries don't support the new architecture. So if I had to say it just one super quick phrase, try fast, fail fast, and tell everyone. And help each other, but that should be a given. Anyway, that's me. Thank you so much.